they laughed when the maintenance worker tried to speak in the executive corridor. Someone muttered, loud enough for him to hear. The woman in the tailored suit held up his worn watch like it was a punchline, reminding him he'd already begged once when he sold it. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He simply nodded and stepped back into the service hallway where power never looks. What none of them understood was that his silence wasn't weakness. It was discipline forged long before this glass tower ever existed. And when the entire building would begin to fail, the same hands they mocked would be the only hands steady enough to stop it. Beneath the surface, this wasn't about a watch at all. It was about what a father gives up when no one's watching. Caleb Armand stood alone after the laughter faded, the echo of polished shoes retreating across marble. He adjusted the strap of his tool bag on his shoulder as if nothing inside him had shifted. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Calm settled over him the way it always did, slow, deliberate, controlled. He had learned long ago that humiliation only has power if you accept it. He moved down the narrow corridor toward the maintenance elevator, boots quiet against industrial flooring. The scent of cleaning solvent mixed with the faint metallic tang of recycled air. On the executive side of the wall, conversations floated in low, confident tones about quarterly gains and expansion forecasts. On this side, pipes rattled and cables pulsed unseen. Hours earlier, he had stood in a small strip mall watch shop, fluorescent bulbs flickering above a glass case of second-hand jewelry. The watch had rested in his palm, heavier than it should have been. His father's watch. Scratched crystal. Worn leather band. A lifetime of ticking memory. Lena's robotics trip invoice had sat folded in his jacket pocket, the final payment circled in red. "You sure?" the shop owner had asked. Caleb had swallowed once. Yeah, she earned it. The buyer who finalized the purchase hadn't looked sentimental. She'd inspected the watch clinically, assessed its resale value, then transferred the funds without ceremony. He hadn't known then that the same woman would be waiting for him at the top of the corporate hierarchy days later. Now in the present, the maintenance elevator doors slid open with a tired groan. He stepped inside, pressing the button for the sublevel where mechanical systems breathed and groaned beneath polished floors. The descent felt symbolic, like slipping beneath the surface of a frozen lake. Above him, sunlight streamed through panoramic windows. Down here, the air was cooler, denser. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Lena's name lit up the screen. "Hey, Bug," he answered softly. "Dad, they sent the itinerary. We're really going. I mean, if it's still okay." He leaned back against the steel wall, closing his eyes briefly. "It's okay. You worked for this. You didn't have to sell anything else, right?" A pause. He could almost see her biting her lip the way she did when she sensed more than he said. "No," he replied. "Stead, everything's handled." She exhaled, relief crackling through the speaker. "I'll make you proud. You already do." When the call ended, the silence felt thicker. He stared at his bare wrist for a moment, the absence noticeable. Then he pushed off the wall and stepped out into the mechanical level. Rows of servers and backup generators stretched in dim lines, red and green indicator lights blinking like distant stars. The low thrum of equipment vibrated through the soles of his boots. He set his bag down beside an access panel and crouched, unscrewing the cover with practiced efficiency. Upstairs, the CEO was conducting a pre-summit walkthrough for investors scheduled to arrive in 2 days. He'd overheard enough to know this event mattered, a livestream presentation, a showcase of new security architecture meant to impress the board. The irony wasn't lost on him. A flicker crossed one of the diagnostic monitors mounted along the wall. Just a blink. Barely perceptible. Caleb's gaze sharpened. He stood slowly, wiping his hands on a cloth. The monitor steadied again, numbers flowing in neat columns. Probably nothing. A minor latency spike. Still, something about the rhythm felt off. He watched another few seconds. A pattern, subtle, but there. He stepped closer, the hum of machines filling his ears. Fingers hovered over the edge of the console without touching it, not his jurisdiction, not his role. Footsteps echoed from the stairwell entrance. Marcus Hale descended, tablet in hand, frustration etched across his face. Facilities said there was a brief voltage dip? Minor fluctuation, Caleb replied evenly. Stabilized now. Marcus barely glanced at him. It's monitoring it. Probably vendor interference. Caleb nodded once. Probably. Marcus turned to leave, already distracted by a notification buzzing on his tablet. Left alone again, he studied the monitor. The flicker returned, longer this time. A whisper of instability beneath a flawless interface. He exhaled slowly. Above him, glass walls reflected confidence and control. Down here, among cables and hidden circuits, he felt something else entirely. A tremor building beneath the surface. And for the first time since selling the watch, Caleb felt the quiet certainty that the sacrifice he'd made might not be the last thing this tower would underestimate. The flicker held for half a second longer than before. Caleb didn't move at first. The low vibration in the mechanical room seemed to deepen, like the building had taken a slow breath and forgotten how to release it. He stepped closer to the diagnostic screen, watching the data ripple and then smooth out again. Upstairs, applause erupted faintly through the ventilation ducts, executives rehearsing confidence. His phone buzzed again. This time an automated email from Lena's school, final payment confirmed. Travel documents released. He closed the notification and slipped the phone back into his pocket. One sacrifice, one promise kept. Footsteps pounded down the metal stairs. Marcus reappeared, jaw tight. We've got intermittent badge failures on level 32. You seeing anything down here? Voltage stabilized, Caleb replied. But there's latency in the backup loop. It's subtle. Marcus frowned at the monitor. Our new architecture shouldn't have latency. It does, he said quietly. Marcus studied him for a second longer than before. You sure? Caleb nodded once. Yes, before Marcus could respond, his tablet chimed sharply. He scanned the screen, color draining from his face. Livestream test just glitched. That's not possible. Another tremor rolled through the hum of machinery. Marcus muttered under his breath and rushed back upstairs. Alone again, Caleb crouched beside an auxiliary panel and removed the cover, exposing bundled cables and labeled ports. His fingers traced along the conduit, not touching, just mapping. The pattern he'd sensed earlier was widening. A faint alarm pulsed once, then stopped. He stood, heart rate steady, mind accelerating. 2 floors above, in the executive corridor lined with abstract art and glass offices, Evelyn Thorne stood before a semicircle of department heads. Her reflection shimmered in the polished wall behind her, composed, immovable. I want perfection, she was saying. Investors don't forgive weakness. An assistant hurried in. Ma'am, we're seeing access inconsistencies. It is investigating. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Then tell them to fix it. On the service level, Caleb replaced the panel cover and headed toward the stairwell instead of the elevator. The metallic clang of each step echoed upward. He wasn't rushing. He didn't need to. When he reached the 32nd floor landing, he saw it immediately, employees swiping badges twice, 3 times. Red lights blinking where green should have been. It worked this morning, someone whispered. Marcus stood near the security desk, frustration rising. Override it manually. It's not responding, the security guard replied. Caleb approached quietly. The system's looping. Marcus glanced at him. Looping? Redundancy check is feeding itself, he said. It'll lock everyone out if it escalates. Marcus hesitated. How do you? A sharper alarm cut through the hallway. Overhead lights flickered. From the far end of the corridor, Evelyn emerged, heels striking marble like punctuation. Her gaze landed on the cluster of employees, and then on him. You, she said coolly, why are you up here? Badge failures, he answered evenly. We have it for that. Yes, he said. You do. The lights flickered again, longer this time. A ripple of unease passed through the staff. Marcus cleared his throat. He mentioned a latency issue earlier. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Maintenance speculating on network architecture is not helpful. Caleb met her gaze without challenge. Speculation isn't what this is. A loud buzz echoed as every badge scanner in the corridor flashed red simultaneously. Someone swore under their breath. Evelyn turned to Marcus. Fix it. We're trying, Marcus replied, fingers flying across his tablet. Caleb looked down the hall toward the secured conference suite, prepared for the investor summit. If the redundancy loop continued, the biometric locks would engage automatically. Once that happened, the executive floor would seal. He spoke carefully. If you isolate the vendor access node before it cascades, we are not taking advice from facilities, Evelyn snapped, voice low but cutting. Silence thickened around them. Caleb stepped back. Understood. He turned and walked toward the stairwell again, the red scanner lights flashing behind him like a warning beacon. As he descended, the overhead announcement system crackled with static. Down on the mechanical level, the hum had shifted pitch, higher now, strained. He set his tool bag on a metal work table and exhaled slowly. This wasn't random. It was probing. His phone vibrated again, Lena sending a photo of her robotics team holding printed boarding passes. He stared at the image, a small smile touching his face despite the tension coiling in his chest. If you believe fathers shouldn't have to prove their worth twice, subscribe with the bell on because this story is just getting started. Above him, another alarm pierced the air, longer, sustained. The flicker on the diagnostic screen stretched into a visible stutter. Caleb reached for the console this time, not as maintenance, but as something the tower hadn't recognized yet. Caleb's fingers hovered over the console for one suspended second, then settled onto the keys. The screen pulsed with a ripple of cascading diagnostics, red lines threading through what should have been isolated systems. He exhaled slowly through his nose, scanning patterns instead of reacting to alarms. The hum in the mechanical room had shifted again, a sharper vibration crawling through steel beams and into bone. Above him, the overhead speakers crackled. Attention. Temporary access disruption on executive levels. Please remain calm. Remain calm. The words felt almost ironic. He tapped into the redundancy monitor, not overriding anything yet, just observing. The vendor node Marcus had dismissed earlier was pinging irregularly, sending recursive authentication requests through the system like a dog chasing its own tail. A deliberate loop. Footsteps thundered down the metal stairs again. Marcus burst into the room, tie loosened, tablet clutched tight. Now biometric scanners are freezing mid-read. It's spreading. It will, Caleb replied evenly. The loop's feeding itself. Marcus looked at the screen, then at him. You sound very sure. I am. Why? Caleb didn't answer that. Instead, he shifted slightly, angling the display so Marcus could see the vendor access node flashing at the edge of the network map. That node shouldn't be active, Marcus muttered. It shouldn't, he agreed. Upstairs, the building lights flickered again, longer this time. The mechanical hum dipped, then surged. Marcus swallowed. Investor rehearsal starts again in 20 minutes. Then you don't have 20 minutes, Caleb said quietly. For a brief second, their eyes locked, not maintenance and its director, but two men measuring risk. The stairwell doors slammed open once more. Evelyn descended this time, heels striking metal steps with sharp authority. Even here, in the underbelly of the building, she carried the executive floor with her, the scent of expensive perfume cutting through oil and ozone. "Explain," she demanded. Marcus gestured at the console. "We're seeing recursive authentication loops from a vendor access node. It's affecting executive-level clearance." Evelyn's gaze shifted to Caleb, who stood with calm steadiness beside the monitor. "And why," she asked coldly, "is he at my security console?" Caleb met her eyes without defiance. "Because it's not just security." She folded her arms. "Enlighten me." He kept his tone even. "The loop is a probe. It's testing system response thresholds. If it escalates, the building will initiate a self-protective lockdown. Executive floors first." Marcus stiffened. "That's not how our architecture works. It is if someone rewrote the vendor handshake protocol," Caleb replied. Silence pressed into the room, thick as humidity before a storm. Evelyn stepped closer to the console, eyes scanning data she clearly didn't fully understand, but refused to admit it. "Are you suggesting we've been breached?" she asked. "I'm suggesting," Caleb said carefully, "that you will be." The lights dimmed abruptly, then surged back. Somewhere above them, a collective gasp echoed faintly through ductwork. Marcus's tablet chimed again, urgent and shrill. He read quickly. Livestream preview just cut out for 12 seconds. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Fix it." Caleb didn't move. She noticed. "Well, if I isolate the vendor node now," he said, "I can stop the loop before it cascades. But once I start, it'll reroute load through the old backbone." Marcus blinked. "The pre-upgrade backbone?" "That's barely used. It's stable," Caleb replied. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Your maintenance, yes. And you're advising my IT director to revert to obsolete infrastructure?" "For 5 minutes," he answered calmly. "That's all it would take." Her silence was colder than anger. "You don't get to improvise on my systems," she said at last. Caleb held her gaze. "Then your systems will improvise on you." The words hung in the air. A deep metallic thunk reverberated through the floor, followed by a series of rapid beeps from the console. Marcus swore under his breath. Executive corridor scanners just went full red. Evelyn turned sharply toward the stairs. "Handle it," she snapped at Marcus. As she ascended, heels striking harder now, the tension followed her like static electricity. Marcus lingered 1 second longer. "You're not just guessing," he said quietly. "No." "Then what aren't you telling me?" Caleb glanced back at the flashing vendor node. "That whoever built this exploit understands layered redundancy," he replied. "And they're patient." Marcus's throat tightened. "Can you stop it?" "Yes," the answer came without arrogance, without hesitation. Marcus studied him as though seeing something new, something that didn't fit the uniform and tool belt. Before he could say more, the overhead lights in the mechanical room flickered violently, plunging them into half-shadow. The console screen glitched, then stabilized. But the vendor node was no longer just flashing, it was multiplying. The vendor node multiplied again. 1 blinking signal became 3. Then 5. Marcus stared at the screen as if it might correct itself under pressure. "That's not possible," he muttered. "We sandboxed vendor access after the upgrade." Caleb leaned closer, the glow from the monitor sharpening the angles of his face. "You sandboxed the visible ports." Marcus looked at him. "What does that mean?" "It means whoever's inside isn't knocking on the front door." Another sharp metallic thud echoed through the building's frame. The lights dimmed, surged, then dimmed again. The mechanical hum beneath their feet shifted into an uneven rhythm, like a heart developing arrhythmia. Upstairs, voices rose, confusion layered over forced calm. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. The executive elevators just stalled between floors. "Fail-safe mode," Caleb said quietly. "It's starting." Marcus's tablet chimed in rapid succession, notifications stacking faster than he could read them. 32nd floor is sealed. Marcus breathed. Biometric vaults locking down. Caleb straightened slowly. "Then you're about 3 minutes from full cascade." Marcus looked at him sharply. "You keep saying that like you've seen it before." Caleb didn't answer immediately. The vendor nodes flickered again, spreading along the network map like cracks in ice. He could feel the building straining now, tension vibrating through pipes and beams. Footsteps pounded down the stairs once more. This time the door burst open with urgency rather than authority. Evelyn stepped inside. No entourage, no polished composure, just sharp focus. The faint scent of smoke clung to her blazer. "There's a short in the east corridor lighting grid," she said, briskly, "and the livestream control room lost primary feed." Marcus swallowed. "We're dealing with a recursive vendor exploit." Her eyes snapped toward Caleb again. "And he's still here. He understands the pattern," Marcus admitted, voice tight. Evelyn's gaze hardened. "He understands maintenance." Caleb's tone remained even. "If you don't isolate the compromised node now, the system will trigger a defensive lockdown. When that happens, your server vault seals for 24 hours. With the live stream tomorrow, that's catastrophic." Her jaw clenched. "Our architecture was designed by the best security firm in the country, and whoever's testing it knows that," he replied. The hum beneath them dipped dangerously low, then surged with a shrill whine. Somewhere above, a collective shout echoed. Marcus's tablet flashed red. "Biometric vault is initiating pre-lock sequence," he whispered. Evelyn's composure cracked, just slightly. "Stop it." Caleb met her gaze. "Authorize me." The words hung between them. Silence pressed into the mechanical room, thick with oil and ozone. "Your maintenance," she said again, quieter this time, but not less sharp. "And you're about to lose control of your own building," he answered. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into near darkness before emergency strips glowed dim red along the walls. Marcus looked from Evelyn to Caleb, conflict visible in his eyes. He predicted every stage so far. Another alarm pierced the air, longer, sustained, impossible to ignore. On the console, the vendor nodes merged into a pulsing cluster at the heart of the system map. Pre-lock sequence, 2 minutes. Evelyn stared at the countdown timer, now blinking at the edge of the screen. "Fine," she snapped. "You get 60 seconds. If you make it worse, I won't," Caleb said calmly. She hesitated just a fraction longer, then gave a sharp nod. Marcus stepped aside. Caleb moved without flourish, fingers gliding across keys with quiet precision. He rerouted authentication flow away from the compromised vendor handshake and toward the dormant backbone, an older infrastructure layer most executives had forgotten existed. The console responded immediately, load balancing indicators shifting like a redirected river. Marcus leaned in. "You're bypassing primary redundancy." For 5 minutes, Caleb repeated. "That's all we need." The building's hum stabilized slightly, no longer shrill but still strained. Pre-lock sequence paused at 0037. Evelyn exhaled, barely. Then the console beeped again. A new alert surfaced. Secondary breach detected. Marcus's face drained of color. "There's a second entry point." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Of course there is." Evelyn stared at the spreading map, realization dawning in her eyes, not about the system, but about him. "You said this was a probe," she said slowly. "It is. And what happens when the probe finishes mapping?" Caleb's gaze remained fixed on the screen. It attacks. Above them, a deep metallic slam echoed through the structure. The executive floor had just sealed. The metallic slam reverberated through the bones of the building, a final, decisive sound. For half a breath, no one spoke. Then Marcus's tablet screamed with overlapping alerts. "Executive floor is fully sealed," he said, voice thin. "Biometric vault engaged. Internal network partitioned." Evelyn stared at the screen as if willpower alone might reverse it. "Override it. It's automated," Marcus replied. "Self-protect protocol." Caleb's eyes tracked the network map. The secondary breach pulsed now, deeper inside the system, no longer probing. It was mapping internal redundancies. "They're inside," he said quietly. Evelyn turned sharply. "Who?" "Whoever designed the exploit," he answered. "They waited for the first loop to distract you." The emergency lights cast everything in low red glow, turning polished authority into something harsher, more fragile. The hum in the mechanical room shifted again, lower but heavier, like a strained engine grinding uphill. Marcus swallowed. Livestream control room just lost primary and backup feeds. "How?" Evelyn demanded. "We isolated. They anticipated that," Caleb said. She stepped toward him, anger flashing back into place like armor. "You speak with remarkable certainty for someone who changes air filters." His gaze didn't waver. "I change what needs fixing." Another alert chimed. "Server vault temperature rising." Marcus's fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled. "Cooling systems aren't responding to digital commands." "Manual override," Caleb said immediately. Marcus looked at him. "Those panels are in the sealed corridor." "Yes." Silence again. Above them, a distant pounding echoed faintly, executives trapped behind biometric locks attempting to regain control. Evelyn inhaled sharply, processing variables. Her building, her summit, her reputation. If the vault overheats, Marcus said carefully, we lose proprietary architecture, years of development. And investors tomorrow, Evelyn added, voice low. Caleb stepped closer to the console. The exploit is testing how you respond under pressure. If you rely on digital correction, it escalates. It wants you trapped inside your own automation. She looked at him with something new now. Not respect, not yet. But doubt. "What do you suggest?" she asked tightly. He pointed to the structural blueprint layered beneath the network map. Manual cooling release valves. Mechanical fail-safes. They predate the upgrade. They aren't tied to the network. Marcus blinked. Those were phased out. They were never removed, Caleb corrected. Evelyn's jaw clenched. "You expect my executive team to crawl through maintenance corridors?" "No," he said evenly. "I expect maintenance to do its job." The words hung heavy. Marcus hesitated. If he's right. Another alert flashed red. Vault temperature rising 3 degrees. The building's hum deepened, metal expanding somewhere in the walls with a soft, ominous tick. Evelyn looked at the countdown timer beside the vault status. "Fine," she said. "You and Hale go. Stabilize it." Marcus nodded quickly. Caleb grabbed his tool bag, already moving toward the stairwell. The air felt warmer as they climbed, tension pressing against his ribs. He could hear raised voices beyond sealed doors, executives realizing their power didn't extend through biometric steel. On the 32nd floor landing, badge scanners blinked useless red. Marcus gestured. Vault corridors beyond that door. Caleb knelt beside a maintenance access panel embedded low in the wall, small, nearly invisible against polished marble. He unscrewed it quickly, exposing a narrow crawl space lined with pipes. Marcus stared. That wasn't on the architectural tour. It wouldn't be, Caleb replied. Heat pulsed faintly from within the wall. They moved through the crawl space single file. the air tight and metallic. Caleb's shoulder brushed insulated pipes, warmth seeping through fabric. His breathing remained slow, controlled. Behind them, alarms continued in steady rhythm. At the end of the crawlspace, he pushed open a concealed hatch into the vault corridor sealed from the outside, but accessible through labor's forgotten pathways. The biometric doors stood shut, heavy and indifferent. Vault temperature rising, 6 degrees. Marcus's voice shook. Manual valves behind that panel. Caleb set his bag down and removed the protective casing. Steam hissed softly from stressed lines. He wrapped a cloth around his hand and gripped the metal wheel. It resisted. He tightened his grip. "Come on," Marcus muttered. Caleb turned the valve with deliberate force. Metal groaned. Then, a deep whoosh echoed through the corridor as coolant surged into dormant channels. Back in the mechanical room, the temperature reading began to stabilize. Marcus let out a shaky breath. "It's dropping." Caleb didn't smile. He was watching the network map on Marcus's tablet. The secondary breach pulsed again, brighter now. "It's not done," he said quietly. Evelyn's voice crackled through Marcus's device. "Report." "Vault stabilized manually," Marcus replied. "But there's still active intrusion." There was a pause on the other end. Then, softer than before, "Bring him to the war room. If you want to see what happens when the underestimated step into the spotlight, subscribe with the bell on, because this is where everything changes." Caleb rose slowly, wiping coolant from his hands. Above them, in glass corridors built for prestige, executives waited helplessly. Below them, in hidden passageways meant for labor, the real battle was just beginning. The hidden hatch clicked shut behind them, sealing away the narrow crawlspace and the hiss of coolant lines. Marcus exhaled shakily, still gripping his tablet as if it might fly from his hands. "They're waiting upstairs," he said. "Board members are already demanding answers." Caleb adjusted the strap of his tool bag and stepped toward the stairwell. "Then let's not keep them waiting." The corridor lights flickered again as they climbed, emergency strips casting long red shadows against marble walls. Somewhere above, raised voices overlapped, sharp, controlled panic wrapped in executive vocabulary. When they pushed through the stairwell door into the executive level, the air felt different, warmer, tighter. Expensive perfume mixed with the metallic scent of overheated circuitry. The biometric locks had partially disengaged after the coolant surge, but several interior doors remained sealed. Assistants stood clustered near the conference suite, whispering urgently. Evelyn stood at the center of it all, arms folded, posture rigid. Her composure had returned, but it looked thinner now, like glass under stress. Her eyes locked onto Caleb. Status, she demanded. "Vault temperature stabilized manually," Marcus answered, "but the intrusion's still active." Caleb stepped forward, feeling every gaze in the corridor shift toward him. Executives in tailored suits, investors who had arrived early, staff who had seen him change light fixtures that morning. "The exploit hasn't escalated yet," he said evenly. "It's observing." Evelyn's jaw tightened. "Observing what?" "How you respond under pressure." A faint murmur rippled through the group. Marcus turned his tablet toward them. The network map pulsed with 2 active breach points now synchronized, like twin heartbeats. "Livestream relays are still unstable," Marcus added. "Backup feed keeps resetting." Evelyn glanced toward the glass doors of the war room, where several board members waited inside, faces tense behind reflections. "Fix it," she said quietly, but there was steel beneath the word. Caleb met her gaze. "If I isolate the second breach digitally, it'll trigger the final phase, and you know that how?" One board member demanded from behind the glass. He didn't look at the man. "Because this isn't random. It's layered." Silence. The hum beneath the floor shifted again, less chaotic now but building toward something concentrated. Marcus swallowed. What's the final phase? Caleb's eyes remained on the pulsing nodes. Data extraction. A collective intake of breath. Evelyn stepped closer, lowering her voice so only he and Marcus could hear. You're speaking like someone who's been on the other side of this. He didn't answer that directly. You built a fortress that depends on automation. Whoever's inside knows the fortress better than you do. And you? She asked. I understand the blueprint. The words settled heavily between them. Behind the glass, one of the investors gestured sharply, impatience evident. Evelyn straightened. You said digital isolation would escalate it. So what's the alternative? Caleb glanced down the corridor toward a rarely used security junction panel embedded near the emergency exit. Physical segmentation. Marcus blinked. You mean disconnecting fiber manually? Yes, that'll kill internal comms entirely, for a few minutes, Caleb said. But it'll blind the intruder. Evelyn hesitated. The idea of intentionally darkening her own executive floor clearly cut against instinct. Another alarm chirped, short, precise. Marcus's face drained. They just initiated packet siphoning from research archives. That's your warning shot, Caleb said. The corridor grew impossibly still. Finally, Evelyn nodded once. Do it. He moved toward the junction panel without hesitation, kneeling beside polished marble that had never been meant to host someone in work boots. Executive stepped back instinctively as he unscrewed the casing. Inside, bundled fiber lines glowed faintly. Marcus crouched beside him. You're sure about this? Yes. You don't look nervous. Caleb's hands worked steadily as he selected the correct bundle. Nervous doesn't help. He disconnected the primary executive fiber trunk. The effect was immediate. Lights dimmed across the corridor. The war room screens inside the glass walls went black. Phones fell silent mid-ring. A wave of startled exclamations echoed. For 3 long seconds, the executive floor existed in near darkness, cut off from its own digital lifeline. Then emergency systems stabilized, minimal but intact. Marcus stared at his tablet. The siphoning stopped, he whispered. On the network map, the pulsing breach nodes flickered erratically, searching, disoriented. Evelyn watched the darkened screens through the glass, jaw set. Bring the feeds back, she said quietly. Caleb reconnected the fiber trunk, but this time through the dormant backbone he'd rerouted earlier, forcing traffic through a path the exploit hadn't mapped. Screens flickered back to life. The breach nodes remained, but weaker now. Marcus let out a breath he'd been holding. You just outmaneuvered it. Caleb rose slowly. No, he said. I slowed it. Evelyn's gaze lingered on him longer than before. The dismissal from earlier had evaporated, replaced by something unsettled. You didn't learn this in maintenance, she said. He met her eyes calmly. No, he agreed. Behind them, the boardroom doors opened. Inside, Evelyn ordered. And for the first time that day, the maintenance technician walked into the war room not as an afterthought, but as the only person who understood the battlefield. The war room lights flickered once as they stepped inside, then steadied into a muted glow. Floor-to-ceiling screens surrounded the oval conference table, each displaying fragments of system diagnostics, security feeds, and investor countdown clocks. The livestream timer in the corner read 18:42,013 until broadcast. Board members turned in their chairs as Caleb entered behind Evelyn and Marcus. Several pairs of eyes lingered on his scuffed boots against polished wood. One of the older directors leaned forward. This is the facilities technician? Marcus answered before Caleb could. He's the one who stabilized the vault. A pause. Evelyn took her seat at the head of the table but didn't break eye contact with Caleb. Explain the current threat. He remained standing, hands loosely clasped in front of him. The exploit entered through a vendor access handshake. It mapped your automated redundancies, then initiated controlled disruptions to measure response time. Another director frowned. And now? Now it's attempting data extraction through mirrored pathways, he replied. When we cut fiber manually, it lost line of sight for a moment. That means it's adaptive, but not omniscient. Silence followed. On the main screen, the two breach nodes flickered weakly, like embers struggling against wind. Evelyn's voice was calm but edged. You said earlier that digital isolation would trigger escalation, yes, and physical segmentation slowed it, yes. She leaned back slightly. What's the next move? Caleb stepped closer to the console integrated into the table. It's preparing a final sweep. When the live stream begins, system load will spike. That's when it'll mask extraction inside broadcast traffic. Marcus's fingers tightened around his tablet. So we delay the live stream? No, Caleb said immediately. All eyes snapped to him. If you delay, the attacker knows you've detected them. They escalate sooner. One director scoffed. You're suggesting we proceed as scheduled? I'm suggesting, Caleb replied evenly, that you let them believe they're winning. The room absorbed that. Evelyn studied him carefully now, not dismissive, not hostile, evaluating. And during this, performance? She asked. We set a trap. The word trap seemed to shift the air itself. Marcus leaned forward. You mean counter-intrusion? Caleb nodded once. We reroute the live stream through the dormant backbone entirely. Keep visible metrics stable. When the exploit piggybacks onto broadcast traffic, it exposes its extraction endpoint. And then, a board member pressed. Then we isolate that endpoint and collapse its access from the inside. The director who had scoffed earlier folded his arms. And you know how to do that? Caleb's gaze remained steady. Yes. A quiet tension rippled through the room. Evelyn's fingers tapped lightly against the table. Once, twice, measured rhythm against ticking clocks. You're speaking like someone who's built systems like this, she said slowly. He didn't deny it this time. I have. The confession hung between them. Marcus turned sharply. Built, as in designed? Caleb's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Layered redundancies. Counter-intrusion protocols. Government contracts. The board members exchanged looks. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. You're not just maintenance. No. He agreed quietly. A long silence settled. Outside the glass walls of the war room, executives paced in the corridor, unaware that the power dynamic inside had just shifted. One director leaned back. Why would someone with that background be changing air filters? The question carried more accusation than curiosity. Caleb didn't flinch. Because my daughter needed stability. And this job offered it. Evelyn's expression flickered, just briefly. The livestream timer ticked down to 18:36:07. Marcus cleared his throat. If he's right, the trap has to be precise. Timing's everything, it is, Caleb said. We let the exploit believe the backbone reroute was accidental. Keep minimal anomalies visible. When it commits to extraction during peak load, I'll flag the endpoint signature and you'll need access privileges, Marcus added. Every gaze turned toward Evelyn. Granting that access would mean elevating him, publicly, above several senior engineers. She held Caleb's eyes for a long moment. You sold me a watch last week, she said quietly. The board members stiffened at the personal note. He didn't look away. Yes, for what? She pressed. My daughter's robotics trip. Another silence, thicker, heavier. The live-stream timer continued its relentless countdown. Evelyn inhaled slowly, decision forming. You will have temporary executive-level clearance, she said at last. Full access to security architecture for the duration of this incident. Marcus exhaled in visible relief. A board member began to protest, but Evelyn cut him off with a glance sharp enough to silence. If this fails, she added, Eyes locked on Caleb, we lose more than data. It won't fail, he said calmly. Confidence, not arrogance. The breach nodes flickered again, weak but persistent. Marcus handed him a tablet linked to primary controls. You're on. Caleb stepped forward, the weight of unseen history settling across his shoulders, not heavy, just familiar. Behind the glass, staff watched as the maintenance technician took position at the center console. The livestream timer ticked down. And for the first time since the alarms began, the boardroom wasn't waiting for rescue. It was waiting for him. The livestream timer rolled down to 1832,044 as Caleb's fingers hovered over the executive console. The room had grown unnaturally quiet. Even the board members who had questioned him earlier now sat still, eyes locked on the screens. Outside the glass walls, the corridor buzzed with muted anxiety, but inside the war room there was only the low hum of servers rerouted through infrastructure no one had valued in years. Marcus leaned in beside him. Backbone traffic is stable. No visible packet spikes. Good, Caleb replied quietly. Let them think we're scrambling. On the main display, the weakened breach nodes pulsed faintly. Patient. Calculating. Evelyn remained seated at the head of the table, hands folded, posture rigid. She wasn't questioning him anymore. She was watching. Caleb adjusted routing permissions, feeding controlled data through the dormant backbone. It felt like guiding current through an old riverbed, unfamiliar to most, but reliable to those who remembered it. Livestream rehearsal in 10, Marcus announced. Keep it on schedule, Caleb said. One of the board members frowned. You're certain that won't expose us further? It will, he answered calmly. That's the point. The honesty unsettled them. He zoomed into the traffic visualization, isolating subtle deviations within the broadcast pipeline. The exploit would hide inside volume, inside attention. Marcus's tablet chimed softly. Research archive attempts have paused. They're waiting, Caleb murmured. Evelyn's voice cut through the tension. What do you need? He glanced at her briefly. Silence on external channels. No press statements. No delay notices. That's already in motion, she said. The timer shifted to 18, 29 down, and 1. Caleb's phone vibrated in his pocket. He hesitated, then stepped back half a pace and answered quietly. Hey, Dad. Lena's voice crackled with excitement. Coach said our demo video might be featured during the trip. A faint smile touched his face despite everything. That's great, Bug. You're not at work, right? You sound different. He glanced at the glowing screens around him. Just fixing something. You always fix things, she said proudly. His throat tightened slightly. Yeah. When he ended the call, the war room felt heavier again, but steadier. If you've ever watched someone underestimated step into their real strength, subscribe with the bell on, because this is the moment it starts paying off. Marcus cleared his throat. Traffic volumes climbing. Pre-broadcast diagnostics engaged. Caleb returned to the console, eyes sharpening. There, he said suddenly. A thin thread of anomalous packets slipped along the broadcast channel, subtle enough to blend with video compression data. Marcus leaned closer. I see it. Don't touch it yet, Caleb warned. Let it commit. The exploit hesitated, then began attaching to mirrored outbound traffic, exactly as predicted. Evelyn stood slowly, moving closer to the table. Is that it? Part of it, Caleb replied. He rerouted internal audit logs invisibly, setting containment parameters like a trapdoor waiting to close. The live stream rehearsal began on the main screen, graphics loading, executive slides animating flawlessly. To any outsider, the company appeared perfectly in control, but beneath that performance, the intruder advanced, following the broadcast's bright signal toward what it believed was unrestricted access. Marcus's breathing grew shallow, extraction attempt beginning. Caleb's hands moved faster now, though still precise. He flagged the endpoint signature as it surfaced, an encrypted address buried 3 layers deep. "Got you," he whispered. He initiated a silent countermeasure, collapsing mirrored pathways behind the exploit while preserving outward broadcast flow. On the network map, the breach nodes flared violently, then flickered. Marcus stared. "It's trying to reroute." "Too late," Caleb said. He executed the final containment sequence, isolating the endpoint inside a quarantined sandbox built into the dormant backbone, an architectural feature almost no one else remembered existed. The pulsing nodes on the screen froze. Then, one by one, they dimmed. Silence filled the war room. Marcus exhaled slowly. Extraction terminated. Evelyn stepped closer to the screen, studying the now still network map. "Is it over?" Caleb monitored residual activity for several long seconds. "Primary breach neutralized," he said at last. "Residual cleanup will take time." The live-stream rehearsal continued smoothly, oblivious to the battle that had just unfolded beneath it. Board members began whispering to one another, shock replacing skepticism. Evelyn's gaze shifted from the screen to him. "You set the trap," she said quietly. "Yes, and you closed it, yes." For the first time since the crisis began, there was no hostility in her expression, only recognition. Outside the glass walls, staff noticed the tension easing, unaware of how close the tower had come to collapse. Caleb stepped back from the console, the weight of command lifting slowly from his shoulders. But the victory wasn't complete yet. On the lower corner of the screen, a faint alert blinked, small, almost invisible. Residual process detected. He narrowed his eyes. The exploit had left something behind. The faint alert blinked again. Residual process detected. Caleb didn't speak immediately. The war room had begun to breathe again. Board members murmuring relief, Marcus wiping sweat from his brow, Evelyn standing straighter as control seemed to return. But that small blinking notification pulsed like a quiet warning bell only he could hear. "Something's still there," he said calmly. Marcus froze. "Where?" Caleb zoomed into the containment sandbox, isolating the quarantined endpoint. The primary breach had been neutralized, collapsed inward like a sealed tunnel, but a sliver of unauthorized code remained embedded inside a dormant process. "It left a watcher," he murmured. Evelyn stepped closer. "Define watcher. A passive fragment," he replied. "It doesn't extract. It observes. It waits for the next spike." Marcus's relief drained instantly. "So we're not clear. We're stable," Caleb corrected, "but not clean." On the screen, the live stream rehearsal ended smoothly. Applause from the marketing team echoed faintly through the corridor outside the glass walls. To the building at large, the crisis had already passed. Inside the war room, tension coiled again. Marcus adjusted his glasses. "Can we purge it?" "Not digitally," Caleb said. Evelyn's voice was controlled but sharp. "Why not?" "Because if it senses forced deletion, it triggers a failsafe, likely timed for tomorrow's live broadcast." Silence followed that. The livestream timer now read 18:11,022. A board member leaned forward. "You're telling us this could reignite during the actual summit?" "Yes." Marcus swallowed. "Then we have to remove it physically." Caleb nodded once. "The Watcher is piggybacking on a hardware authentication module. It's not purely software anymore." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Location?" He pulled up the architectural overlay and traced a path along the executive floor. Server vault, secondary rack. Physical node behind biometric casing. Marcus exhaled sharply. "That rack is sealed inside the vault corridor?" "Yes." The memory of the crawlspace still lingered in Caleb's shoulders, the narrow heat, the hiss of coolant. Evelyn studied the map, calculating risk versus optics. If we open the vault publicly after stabilizing it, rumors start. If we don't, Caleb said evenly, you gamble tomorrow's summit on a fragment of hostile code. Her jaw tightened. One of the directors interjected. Couldn't we postpone the summit? Evelyn didn't look away from Caleb. Postponement signals weakness, and deletion signals retaliation, he added quietly. Marcus ran a hand down his face. So what's the move? Caleb straightened. We remove the hardware module manually, replace it with a clean unit, quietly. And the Watcher? Evelyn pressed. It dies with the module. The room absorbed that. Outside the glass, staff resumed movement, some laughing nervously, unaware of the second wave gathering beneath them. Evelyn folded her arms, eyes steady. You're suggesting another crawl through maintenance access? Yes, she held his gaze. You're very comfortable down there. It's where the real structure lives, he replied. A flicker of something unreadable passed across her face, perhaps recognition of the metaphor. Marcus glanced at the timer. We have under 2 hours before full rehearsal reset. Caleb nodded. Then we move now. Evelyn turned toward the board members. This conversation doesn't leave this room. Several nodded, subdued. As they exited the war room, executives in the corridor straightened instinctively, trying to read expressions for reassurance. Evelyn gave them a curt nod. Systems stabilized. Resume operations. Caleb and Marcus peeled away toward the sealed corridor. The biometric lock still glowed red. Marcus whispered, if this goes wrong. It won't. Caleb said quietly. He knelt again beside the low maintenance panel in the marble wall, unscrewing it with steady hands. The corridor lights flickered faintly, lingering instability still present. Marcus watched him crawl into the narrow access space. You always this calm? Marcus asked softly. No, Caleb replied from inside the wall. Just when it matters. The crawlspace felt warmer than before. Steam from earlier coolant release still clung to the metal surfaces. He moved forward carefully, shoulder-brushing insulated pipes. Behind him, Marcus followed less gracefully, breath louder in the confined space. At the end of the tunnel, the concealed hatch opened into the vault corridor once more. The biometric doors stood silent now. Vault stable. Caleb approached the secondary rack panel indicated on the overlay. He removed the casing slowly, exposing the authentication module, small, unremarkable. On Marcus's tablet, the Watcher process flickered as Caleb touched the module housing. It senses disturbance, Marcus whispered. I know. He disconnected the module carefully, easing it free from its port. On the screen, the Watcher flared, then went dark. Marcus stared. It's gone. Caleb replaced the unit with a clean spare from his bag, securing it firmly. The vault corridor felt cooler now, steadier. As they sealed the panel and prepared to crawl back, Marcus glanced at him in the dim light. You didn't just study this stuff, Marcus said quietly. You designed systems like this, didn't you? Caleb paused only a second. Yes, they climbed back toward the executive floor. Above them, polished glass reflected restored confidence. Below them, in the forgotten passages of labor, the final remnant of intrusion lay silent. For now. The words lingered in Marcus's mind as they climbed out of the crawlspace and resealed the marble panel behind them. The executive corridor looked almost serene again, assistants moving briskly, lights steady, the earlier panic reduced to whispers no one would officially acknowledge. Caleb stood, brushing dust from his hands. Marcus checked his tablet one more time. Watcher process is completely gone. No residual traffic. Run a deep sweep, Caleb replied. Layer by layer, Marcus nodded and walked ahead toward the war room. When they stepped back inside, the board members looked up immediately. The tension that had briefly softened returned in cautious anticipation. "Well?" one director asked. "Hardware module replaced," Marcus reported. "Residual fragment eliminated." Caleb moved to the central console again, scanning system diagnostics across multiple displays. Backbone routing remained stable. Vendor nodes were dormant, cooling systems steady. No phantom pings. Evelyn remained standing this time rather than seated, her posture composed but no longer rigid. And the likelihood of recurrence? Minimal, Caleb answered. Unless there's a third layer. Silence. Marcus glanced nervously at the screens. "You think there is?" Caleb watched traffic patterns for a full 5 seconds before replying. "No. If there were, we'd see signature noise by now." The board members exchanged glances, relief cautiously returning. One director leaned back in his chair. "So tomorrow's summit proceeds as scheduled?" "Yes," Evelyn said before anyone else could answer. Her eyes shifted toward Caleb again, studying him as if recalibrating a calculation. "You predicted every escalation," she said evenly. From the probe to the siphon to the hardware embed, he met her gaze without triumph. It followed a pattern. "Whose pattern?" she pressed. He hesitated, not out of fear, but choice. "Mine," he said quietly. The room went still. Marcus blinked. "Yours?" Caleb rested one hand lightly on the edge of the console. 10 years ago, I helped design layered counter-intrusion architecture for federal contractors, vendor handshake exploits, redundant backbone segmentation, physical override traps. One of the board members leaned forward sharply. "You're saying someone used your blueprint against us?" "I'm saying," Caleb replied, "that someone studied the same playbook." Evelyn's expression shifted, not suspicion, but comprehension. "And why?" she asked carefully. "Are you working maintenance here?" The question carried no mockery now, only genuine inquiry. He held her gaze. "After my wife passed, I stepped away from that world. High-clearance contracts don't leave much room for raising a child alone. This job did. Silence settled differently this time, not tense, but heavy with perspective." Marcus let out a slow breath. "You left national-level security to change filters and tighten bolts. I left instability," Caleb corrected. Evelyn's eyes flicked briefly to his bare wrist. "The watch," she said softly. "You sold it to pay for her trip, yes." The board members shifted uncomfortably, aware they were witnessing something beyond corporate crisis. She looked back at the screens, then at the room. "Today, this company survived because the man we dismissed as facilities understood our architecture better than the people who commissioned it." No one contradicted her. A director cleared his throat. "There will need to be a formal report." "There will," she agreed, "and it will reflect accuracy." Caleb straightened slightly. "The breach attempt wasn't random. It targeted our vendor integration. That's a weakness we can correct permanently." Marcus nodded quickly. "We should audit all third-party handshake protocols. We will," Evelyn said. She stepped closer to Caleb, lowering her voice enough that only those nearest could hear. "You were right about automation," she said. "We trusted it too much. Automation's only as strong as the assumptions behind it," he replied. The livestream timer ticked down quietly in the corner, now irrelevant to the immediate threat but still marking the rhythm of corporate life. Evelyn's gaze lingered on him 1 second longer. "You'll remain in this room through tomorrow's summit," she said finally. Advising security. It wasn't framed as a favor, it was recognition. Marcus smiled faintly, relief mixing with admiration. Caleb nodded once. Understood. Outside the glass, employees began returning to normal routines, unaware how close their workplace had come to public collapse. Inside, the board members resumed seats with subdued respect. The tower had been tested. Its automation had faltered, its prestige had cracked, and the person who restored it stood in work boots on polished wood, steady, unshaken. For the first time since the alarms began, there were no flashing nodes on the screen, only quiet systems running clean. For nearly 30 seconds, no one in the war room spoke. The silence felt different now, less like fear, more like recalibration. Marcus broke it first. Full sweep completed. No dormant scripts, no hidden endpoints. We're clean. Caleb watched the final diagnostic bar complete its cycle, green across every layer. Evelyn turned slowly toward the board members seated around the table. "You've heard the assessment." One of the older directors folded his hands. "We were minutes from catastrophic exposure." "Yes," she said plainly. "And the intervention came from," he glanced toward Caleb, recalculating his earlier skepticism, "unexpected expertise." Caleb didn't shift under the attention. He simply stood there, shoulders relaxed, expression steady. Evelyn stepped forward, no longer speaking only to the board but to the room itself. The breach was neutralized through manual backbone rerouting, physical segmentation, and hardware extraction. She paused deliberately. Those measures were executed by our facility's technician. The word technician carried a different weight now. A murmur rippled through the directors, respect layered with discomfort at their own misjudgment. Marcus added quietly, he predicted each escalation phase before it occurred. The older director looked at Caleb directly. "Your background, federal architecture design?" "Yes," Caleb answered. "And you stepped away voluntarily?" "Yes, for your daughter." A slight nod. Silence again. Outside the glass walls, a few senior executives lingered, trying to decipher body language inside the war room. Word had already spread that something major had occurred. Evelyn turned toward the door, open it. Marcus hesitated. "You want?" "Yes." The glass doors slid open. Executives in the corridor straightened immediately, conversations halting mid-sentence. Evelyn didn't raise her voice, but it carried clearly. "The security incident has been resolved. Systems are stable. Relief visibly passed through the staff." She stepped slightly aside, gesturing toward Caleb. The resolution was led by Mr. Arman. The corridor went quiet. Some faces showed confusion, others recognition. One assistant whispered, "Maintenance?" Caleb felt the weight of dozens of eyes, but he didn't shrink from it. He simply stood where he was. Evelyn continued, measured and direct. "Earlier today, I dismissed his assessment. That was an error. The admission hung in the air. A CEO acknowledging fault publicly was not common currency." She met Caleb's eyes briefly before addressing everyone again. His prior experience in federal security architecture allowed this company to avoid catastrophic data loss. Whispers grew louder now, not mocking, but stunned. Marcus stepped forward. Manual cooling override, physical fiber segmentation, endpoint isolation. All his calls. One of the executives who had laughed in the corridor earlier avoided eye contact. Caleb didn't look toward him. Evelyn's voice remained steady. "Effective immediately, Mr. Arman will serve as Interim Director of Infrastructure Security through tomorrow's summit." The corridor absorbed that like a shockwave. Caleb blinked once, not out of disbelief, but adjustment. "That's not necessary," he began quietly. "It is," she interrupted. "Because the architecture you built saved this one." Their eyes held for a long moment, not adversaries now, but equals measuring respect. In the silence that followed, a faint vibration buzzed in Caleb's pocket. He stepped aside and checked his phone. A message from Lena. "Coach says they're announcing travel scholarships tomorrow. I'm nervous." His chest tightened, not with fear, but fierce pride. He typed back quickly, "You've already earned it, no matter what happens." When he looked up again, the corridor still watched him differently, The maintenance technician, the architect, the father. Evelyn noticed the glance at his phone. Your daughter? Yes, she's fortunate, Evelyn said quietly. He considered that. So am I. For a moment there was no corporate hierarchy in the space, just people reassessing assumptions. One of the board members stepped into the corridor. We'll need a formal security briefing tomorrow morning. You'll have it, Caleb replied. His voice carried authority now, not loud but undeniable. The tower lights above them glowed steady and bright, no flicker, no hidden pulse, only systems functioning as they should. And in the reflection of the glass walls, the image of a man once laughed at now stood at the center of it all, calm, grounded, unshaken. Not because he'd sought recognition, but because the moment demanded he step into it. The corridor slowly emptied as executives returned to their offices, voices hushed, glances still drifting back toward him. The building that had nearly locked him out hours earlier now felt strangely open. Inside the war room, only Evelyn and Marcus remained. Marcus gathered his tablet, offering Caleb a look that was half respect, half disbelief. I'll finalize the overnight monitoring protocols. Thank you, Caleb said. When Marcus left, silence settled between him and Evelyn. The glass walls reflected them side by side, polished heels and work boots on the same floor. You could have let it fail, she said quietly. He looked at her. And let hundreds of people lose jobs? Let years of work collapse? She held his gaze. After the way I spoke to you. That wasn't about me, he replied. That was about pressure. A faint exhale escaped her. Not quite a laugh. I held up your watch like it was a bargaining chip, she said. I misjudged what it represented. It represented my father, he answered, and my daughter. Her eyes flicked to his bare wrist again. The shop still has it. He didn't respond immediately. I bought it personally, she continued. Not as a transaction. As inventory, the pause stretched. I'd like to return it, she said. Not as charity. As correction, he studied her carefully. There was no condescension in her tone now, no superiority, only accountability. You don't owe me anything, he said. I do, she replied firmly. Leadership isn't about being right all the time, it's about recognizing when you weren't. The building systems hummed steadily around them, a quiet testament to what had just been saved. After a moment, he nodded once. Then I'll accept it as a purchase reversal. A small, relieved smile touched her face. Fair. The next morning, the summit proceeded without incident. Investors applauded new projections. Security architecture was praised for its resilience. No one outside that inner circle knew how close the tower had come to collapse. But inside the company, something had shifted. Word spread quickly, not just that a breach had occurred, but who had stopped it. Staff in service corridors nodded at him differently. Engineers asked questions with respect rather than dismissal. Even the executive who had laughed avoided eye contact, not from contempt now, but embarrassment. By afternoon, Caleb stood in the atrium lobby watching employees gather around screens displaying internal announcements. Evelyn stepped forward at the podium. Yesterday, she said clearly, our company faced a serious security threat. It was resolved because we listened eventually to expertise where we least expected it. A few knowing glances passed through the crowd. Effective immediately, Caleb Arman is appointed Director of Infrastructure Security. Applause rose, hesitant at first, then stronger. He didn't step forward right away. He simply stood there, absorbing the sound without letting it inflate him. The applause wasn't for pride, it was for proof. Later that evening, he stood outside the small watch shop where this entire chain had quietly begun. Evelyn met him there. No entourage, no cameras. She handed him a small velvet box. Inside lay the worn leather band, the scratched crystal, the steady ticking heartbeat of his father's watch. He fastened it around his wrist slowly. It fit like it never left. "Your daughter leaves tomorrow, doesn't she?" Evelyn asked. "Yes, she's lucky to have you." He glanced down at the watch, then back at the glass tower visible in the distance. "I'm lucky to have her." The next morning at the airport, Lena hugged him tightly before heading toward security with her robotics team. "I'll make you proud," she whispered. "You already do," he replied. As she disappeared into the terminal, he checked the time. The watch ticked steadily against his pulse, not a symbol of loss anymore. A reminder of value, misjudged, then restored. He turned back toward the parking lot, toward a company that now understood leadership looked different than it once assumed. This wasn't a story about a watch. It wasn't even about a breach. It was about dignity that doesn't need permission. Ask me for the next story title. Subscribe, and don't miss our next story, She Laughed at the Single Dad at the Gala until her father asked him to dance. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?